Yo, are you a coach and a consultant and you want to really like leverage and dial in your paid ads, especially since the iOS update? You want to stick around with our special guest. We're going to be talking to Mr. Sam Bell, and that's all coming up next. Welcome back to the LVTV podcast, where we talk all things content, clients, and cash flow for the profit and impact focused coaches and consultants. And we have Sam with us, Mr. Sam Bell. Can I just call you Mr. Sam Bell? For some reason, I don't know why. I feel like calling you somebody who's in their 60s and their 70s, Mr. Sam Bell. Or how would you prefer me
Hey man,
reference you?
Sam, however you feel comfortable, brother, it's fine with me. It's all good.
Well, Mr. Bell, I think I'll narrow it down to that. Well, Mr. Bell,
Okay.
appreciate you coming on. Thank you for being a guest here as we talk about paid ads in this just crazy iOS update that seems to be getting everybody in a flux, right? Everybody is having some issues with it, and we don't have to have those issues anymore. So I want to talk with you before we get into the iOS updates and paid ads. Like, where were you? What was going on with your life for the light bulb to click for you and say, I want to work with paid ads. I want to have an agency. I want to help coaches, consultants, and service providers?
It's a great question. So the short answer is it was an accident. It wasn't intentional.
I knew it.
It wasn't intentional in any way, shape, or form. In fact, just a quick backstory. So I started off in the real estate investing space as a real estate investor, just buying, selling houses in Atlanta, flipping houses, and then around 2007, a lot of the buyers started to dry up in the marketplace. And I had always been online because even prior to that, I had always learned. I learned about SEO. I learned about social media was still emerging. YouTube was brand new at the time, and I basically found a way to actually start ranking my sites organically to do lead generation. So I was probably like one of the first real estate investors to actually start filming their properties. I would walk around and videotape my properties, and then I will upload them to YouTube, and then I would use WordPress and optimize those so that way I'll generate leads. So I wound up going to a seminar. I was talking to one of the guys that put on this other seminar, and I was telling him what I was doing. He's like, man, like, this is really cool. Like, you should really come and speak at my next event and, teach other people about this. I'm like, all right, cool. So I put together a little short presentation. I went there, I shared what I was doing, and I met another gentleman that was there. He was, just blown away by the presentation. He's like, man, we can turn this into a course. Like, we can sell this information. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm with it. Let's do it. So me and him, we connected, and basically I provided all the content and they did all the sales. So we had a collaboration, and essentially we went out and sold around $2 million worth of that real estate investing course. It was called Real Estate Wealth 2.0. And that brought me into the world of information marketing, but in the real estate investing niche and space. So I kind of developed a reputation for, social media, for like SEO. And then I wound up launching my own real estate coaching program. I built a software program as well to help real estate investors find REO properties, because the crash happened at this time. So there's a lot of bank foreclosures and REO properties on the market. So in order to actually market that software, I started using Google display ads because there was no Facebook ads at the time. So Google was the only way really to market. I mean, you still had Bing and Yahoo, but there was no traffic there. So I started doing that. And then around 2009, there was a big update with Google, and a lot of the real estate info marketers had their ad accounts banned because there's a huge Google slap. So a lot of these guys had their ad accounts slapped, but they knew I was running ads still. So people started approaching me for consulting and saying, hey, can you help us, get back with Google, get our ads up and going. So I'm like, cool, yeah. So I just started doing some consulting work, just kind of helping people out. And then I'm determined, like, man, like, there's something here, like people need help with this. I like this. And I like the fact of being able to go through the process of basically building something from scratch online and literally having hundreds and thousands of people start coming to the website and, becoming leads, and then leads becoming sales. So I got really, really good at that. And that's when I started my agency officially in 2009. So that's how I transitioned from real estate investor, info marketer to agency owner.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy, bro. Like I'm loving that story because I think it paints that picture of you know, it's not what you wanted to do, but it actually came to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Sometimes we chase things down, but it seems like the demand was like, nah, bro, like we'll pay you for this. Come on and teach us. So I love
yeah.
that. So iOS update for those who are sleeping under a rock when it comes down to paid ads. Can you briefly just describe what happened and what's going on with this thing called the iOS update or iOS 14 update? I'll say that.
Sure. So just to provide some context, to this, ads, specifically, social media ads, primarily Facebook, Instagram, and even Google as well, but primarily Facebook and Instagram. They are data-driven machines. Facebook is a social media site, but it's controlled by an algorithm. Well, for the algorithm to properly work, it needs data, right? So you got to feed it data, and that's really what Facebook is. Facebook is a data-driven machine. So the more data you can feed into Facebook when you're running ads, the better Facebook can learn. Okay, the machine learning can actually go and learn and then optimize.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a phenomenal job building this machine that took the data and user behavior and was able to identify who are the best people and be able to track conversions all the way throughout the sales process. Okay, and they got really, really good at this, and people have made millions, if not billions, of dollars off of the Facebook ads platform. Well, Apple decided that, hey, you know what? We don't like you gathering all this data from our users, and we're going to require that our users opt in order to allow you to continue to gather this data.
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, once Apple made this update, I believe like 95% of the people who've updated to iOS 14 opted out of being tracked. So now what that means is that Facebook, where they used to be able to get all of this data from iOS users, they can no longer get that data. So if someone clicks on that ad and they've opted out of tracking, that data does not get sent back into Facebook because they have to now abide by the new tracking rules. So all of that data, when someone clicks on the ad, if they convert, Facebook is not seeing any of that. So what that means is that all of that conversion data that's happening, that data is not being sent back into the machine for it to learn. So now the machine is like, okay, I don't know what's going on. And now you're going to see your results suffer. And that's what's happening, essentially.
There it is. I don't think it could have been explained any more thoroughly by anyone else. Like I would just cut a lot of that out. I didn't have all the data that 90% of the people opted out. That's crazy to even think about. So as far as coaches and consultants who are running paid ads or would like to run paid ads, and they keep hearing about the iOS update and all of that ad apocalypse, they hear all this negativity around it. What are some of the things you've noticed so far of like mistakes that these coaches and consultants are making when they're running their paid ads that's actually blocking them from, using the data properly?
Yeah, so it really boils down to a lot of people have gotten comfortable because it
Mm-hmm.
has been so easy for so long
Mm-hmm.
to set up ads, just throw up your pixel, run some ads, and boom, Facebook does all the heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that doesn't work anymore. You cannot be a lazy marketer. Okay. So, if you're a coach or consultant or course creator, whatever, if you're running ads, you have to find a way to get the data in order to properly optimize. And the challenge is most people who are in this space who are using Facebook and Instagram as a marketing platform, they're not really marketers and advertisers. There are coaches and they are consultants, and they haven't really developed the skill set necessary. And it can be challenging because there's a lot of technical terms, there's a lot of different things that you do need to learn if you're going to be spending money on a platform, right? It's not like traditional media where I can just run an ad in the newspaper and say, hey, give me this and this, or I'm gonna send out a mailing list. There are some more moving pieces, so it's a little bit more complex. And I think it just really boils down to, our people shall perish for a lack of knowledge. They don't know what they don't know, right? So, you have to take the time to understand what information is necessary in order to be successful when you're running your ads. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things that you can do so that way you have a much clearer picture of what's happening when you are actively running campaigns versus just throwing up a pixel, throwing up some ads and wishing for the best, which is what a lot of people do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's real. That's real. I've seen it, and you can lose your shirt, your credit card, and your whole house if you go dump all that information in. So what are some of the tactical things that they should do, right? And they know about a pixel. They know they need to be running ads. What are just a couple things that they should do in order to beat the iOS update?
Yeah. So there are a few different things you should do. And, with our agency, we take a multi-layer tracking approach into getting data. Now, unfortunately, there's nothing you can actually do to get around the iOS 14 update.
Mm-hmm.
So what you need to be able to do is get even more clarity and have multiple data sources. One of the biggest challenges is that people depend exclusively on the Facebook Ads Manager for all of their data and to make their decisions. Well, if half of the users who are clicking on your ads, if that data is not being reported, then you're not able to make, really truly data-driven decisions. So you need more data from multiple sources to better make decisions. So your first level of defense is obviously the Facebook pixel, but you want to implement the Facebook pixel in two ways, and there's two ways to implement it. So you have the website pixel, which is just a little piece of code you copy, you put it on your website. The other one is CAPI, or the Conversion API pixel. So as opposed to cookies and data from the website, this is what's called server-to-server communication. So it's basically your website server communicating directly to the Facebook server and passing data from the users on your website. So you want to have multiple layers of tracking from Facebook. So that's the first line of defense that you want to implement across the board. The second thing that you want to do, and everyone should be doing, is using what's called UTM variables. Okay. Now, UTM variables are essentially, it's a standard of how it's a standard protocol for basically tracking, what campaigns, when someone clicks on a ad, what campaign it came from, what's the audience you're targeting, what's the ad ID, as well as the Facebook click ID. So when you go through the ad setup process, there's a little box that says enter in your UTMs. So you want to use UTMs. I personally use what are called dynamic UTM variables. And all that means is that I have just a little piece of code that I put right into Facebook when I create my ads, and it automatically populates, the campaign name, the ad set name, the ad name, as well as the Facebook click ID. And when someone lands on my page, I then pass that data that is inside of that URL string. When someone clicks on your ad, and if anyone, if you don't know what I'm talking about, click on any Facebook ad and look at your web browser, look at the URL, and look at all those, little letters and numbers behind that. That is the UTM variables in the URL string. I pass that information into my CRM, right? So every email system. So when someone opts in, if they're registering for a webinar or if they're opting into a page, I then can pull all that data from the URL and then store it inside of my CRM. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, I want to know what campaign, what ad, what interest is responsible for generating that lead. Okay. So that's the first thing that I want to do. I want to be able to put that data in there so I can always go back and cross-reference. If someone purchases, I can say, okay, well, which campaign did this person come from? What was the interest I was targeting, or what was the keyword I was targeting? And what ad did they click on? Which ad is responsible for bringing this person in? Okay. So that's the second layer. The third layer of defense is you need a proper attribution tool. So what that means is you have to be able to identify, what campaign and what ad is responsible for the actual sales conversion. Because the first ad that they clicked on, that may have been the ad that may have gotten them to convert into a lead, but that may not necessarily be the ad that got them to convert into a sale. So you have to be able to properly attribute which campaign is responsible for actually generating a sale, because you may be allocating money to your budget based on where all your leads are coming from, but it may be that those campaigns aren't necessarily generating sales. So you're getting all these leads. You're like, man, I'm getting a great cost per lead, but it might be the campaign where you're paying 3 times as much for a lead that's responsible for all of the sales. But if you don't have a proper attribution model, there's no way to see that. So you need an attribution tool to be able to track and see that. And there's tons of them out there. I personally use and recommend Hyros. Hyros is what we use for proper attribution. And so that's our third layer of defense. Okay. The fourth layer is you want to be able to track your funnel and user behavior. Okay. So from that perspective, I want to know what every step in my funnel, I want to know how the user interacts with every single page. Okay. And I also want to know the conversion rate percentages for every single step in my funnel as well. And I also want to have a visual representation of that, of the user behavior, as well as the actual funnel steps. So there's a few different tools that we use for that. We use a combination of Funnelytics and Hotjar. Hotjar actually provides me with heat maps, and I can literally record the behavior. So when someone hits the page, I can actually, it records a video of them, how they interact with the page, where they click at, where they read, how long they're on the page. And then I can also see the conversion metrics of each step. So now I can actually make incremental improvements in my actual sales process, as well as make changes to the landing page to optimize based on user behavior. Because if I see a bunch of people bouncing off of this page and they're not staying long, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to change the layout. Maybe I need to change the headline. Maybe I need to change the location of the button. There are things that you need. There are things that you'll be able to see over time with enough data that where you can actually make incremental improvements. And what happens is as you make those incremental improvements, that compounds, right? And that's really what all about conversion rate optimization is. You're making incremental improvements, and you're doing it at the ad level, okay, and you're doing it at the funnel level as well. So when you implement, those strategies for tracking, now you have a much clearer picture to make better data-driven decisions, and you're not 100% dependent upon flawed data from Facebook to make those decisions.
Listen, if people listening to this podcast or watching, don't go back and rewind and listen carefully, you're going to leave money on the table. Like, he legit just gave y'all the game. Like, that's enough right there. If you are, you know what, Sam, I heard someone say you got to have a business IQ to be able to implement off of free. And if your business IQ is not there, you just missed out on so much gold. Like, I'm over here on the inside like, bro, you giving them the sauce for real. Yeah, so I appreciate you sharing that, because it's so important to go steps further to really get that data. Like you said, data-driven decisions, which I always tell people about, always beats out the emotion, right? You say, oh my God, my lead costs are so low. This must be what's working. This must be what's bringing in the client. So I'm so glad you pointed that out, bro. I just tipped my hat off to you. That was the sauce.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's it's unfortunate, but again, a lot of people, you don't know what you don't know, right? So really just re-educating yourself to really think like a media buyer and to look at things, look at the numbers, look at the data, not what you feel, right? Because a lot of times we'll create ads. I'm like, man, this ad is going to absolutely crush it, and then it bombs, and then the ad that I'm like, oh, I don't know really if this is going to work, but and then it not be the one that wins. So you never really know. You will over time begin to develop more of a higher level of awareness of what has a higher probability to work over time, especially when you become familiar with your audience, what their wants, what their needs are, things like that. But even still, you always got to test. All right. And then even when you get something that's working, that becomes your control. And then everything you're doing is trying to beat that. Right. So whatever your best audience is, whatever your best ad is, whatever your best landing page it is, you always want to have at minimum a A/B split test running to try to make incremental improvements to beat that.
Yeah, man. Dude, you're giving them the sauce. I'm almost to the point, like, I don't even want to give them no more. You gave them more than enough. Like, just that 3-tier. And here's the thing, guys. This is the information he sends out on his email list. That's what prompted me. I said, okay, I see what he's doing. I see the sauce. I have to have him on the podcast, and I reached out. So thank you for coming on. So I want, you know what, I don't even know like where to go from this because it's so good, it's so rich. But what I do want to ask is, because I imagine someone who's listening to this, and it may seem like it's overwhelming, but they hear me talking about that it's good, and they may feel like, wow, I mean, if LV saying it's dope, it must be dope, but I really don't get it. How can they get in contact with you to really flush this out to see if it's going to be a good fit for them?
Sure. So basically just go to the socialadsmentor.com, or you can follow us, Social Ads Mentor, on IG as well. And we're going to be cranking out a lot more content, doing a lot of posts, and also have, a training program and done for you program too, because there's a lot of people, man, that, it is a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I wanted to bring to the market after being in this business for so long and seeing like kind of what's needed out there is like, look, I want to make it as easy as possible for people to start fishing, while also teaching them how to fish. So it's almost in a way where like, look, I'm gonna catch these first fish for you, right? But then I'm also going to teach you how to go out there and do it yourself, so that way you have the proper education. And that's essentially what the Social Ads Mentor is all about. It's about, getting people up and going as fast as possible while properly equipping them with the proper information, training, and education, so that way they can actually go out there and be successful long term.
Yeah, I love it, man. So make sure y'all go follow, because again, that's gold. And if you don't understand, I imagine that he has a process there where you can go to the website, have a call, sit down, talk with him and his team, and they can help you flush all of this out and make sure it's a good fit for you. So Sam, I'm done, bro. Like I said, after you dropped that bomb, I don't know what else to say. So I appreciate you coming on to the podcast. Any final words you want to share?
Most importantly, man, just, for everyone, take action and don't quit. Like coming into a new world where, all of this stuff seems like a foreign language. It was a foreign language to me at some point, at one point in time. Right. So, don't expect that you're going to get it all at once. It's okay. Take bite-sized chunks, but more importantly, take imperfect action and move forward, because one of the best teachers is experience. So the more that you do this stuff, the more that you will learn, and failure is part of the process. So many people operate from the perspective of, well, I don't want to mess this up, or I want to mess this up. You will mess it up. Accept that and get comfortable with it and do it. Like, just go ahead, and the faster you break it, the faster you're going to learn from it. So it's the complete opposite in this world than it is, in the traditional corporate environment or executive setting. The faster you fail, the faster you can succeed. So embrace failure. Know that it's part of the process, and that the faster you fail, the faster you'll learn, and that it'll actually click and get it. So that's my word of advice.
Listen, man, when I started out, that was my fear. I don't want to mess nothing up. I don't want to break it. And then I started learning. I'm like, oh, you're going to break it because you testing. It's inevitable. So, man, listen, you giving people the gold on this, man. That's a gold star episode right here on the LVTV podcast. Thank you guys so much. If you thought that this information was definitely valuable, make sure you check him out. Go reach out to Sam. But also, if you have a moment, rate and review this podcast. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll appreciate it. Again, this is the LVTV podcast, and continue to be social on social media.